In the peaceful suburban town of Oak Hollow, Mark and his family thought they had found the perfect place to start fresh. But when their lives collided with the relentless power of the HOA president, Vance, their dream quickly turned into a nightmare. What began with a simple rule violation soon escalated into a battle for survival, as dark secrets and personal vendettas surfaced. Join us as we uncover the chilling story of a family's fight against an HOA gone too far, where justice, community, and revenge all collide. Mark and Ava had always dreamt of a simple, quiet life, and Oak Hollow seemed like the perfect place to raise their daughter, Khloe. The small suburban town, nestled on the edge of a sprawling forest, promised peace and tranquility. Mark worked from home, managing his small tech company, while Ava, ever the mysterious figure, kept a low profile. The past she'd left behind was one she never spoke of. But Mark had come to accept the silence, knowing that it was part of the woman he loved. Khloe, their bright-eyed 7-year-old, was the light of their lives. She filled their home with laughter, her curiosity about the world reminding them of the beauty in everyday moments. They were a family, trying to escape the chaos of city life and build something meaningful in the quiet of Oak Hollow. But peace, as they soon learned, was a fragile illusion. It began with a simple violation. One evening, Mark installed a small, solar-powered motion light by the front door, a practical addition that would help the family navigate their porch at night. But the HOA president, Vance, didn't see it as a small addition. Ellen had built her empire through relentless enforcement of petty rules, and she ruled Oak Hollow with an iron fist. The light was a violation of the HOA's strict aesthetic guidelines, and Ellen wasted no time sending a warning. At first, Mark tried to reason with her. It was just a light, a harmless, practical fixture that had no impact on the neighborhood's appearance. But Ellen wasn't interested in reason. To her, it wasn't about the light, it was about power, control, and making sure that no one could disrupt her perfect image of the community. She imposed a fine and demanded the light be removed, giving Mark a mere week to comply. This might have been the first time Mark encountered Ellen's tyranny, but it wouldn't be the last. Soon, the HOA began attacking other aspects of their life. The next target was a modest bird bath in their front yard, which Ellen claimed was an eyesore. Then came complaints about the color of their mailbox and the positioning of their garden gnome. Each time, Mark tried to keep calm, but the stress was mounting. They had barely settled in, and now, the community that promised peace was beginning to feel like a battleground. The tipping point came when Ellen demanded that the hunting tower Mark's father had built decades ago be torn down. It was an old, weathered structure, but it was part of his family's history. Mark's father had passed away years ago, and the tower was one of the few remnants of their time together. But Ellen didn't care about the memories attached to it. In her mind, it was a violation of the community's aesthetic standards. Mark refused to take it down, and the battle began to escalate. It wasn't long before Mark realized that Ellen's crusade wasn't about rules, it was personal. One evening, as he returned home from a business trip, he saw her across the street, watching his house with a calculating look. Something in her eyes unsettled him. It was more than just authority, it was malice. And when he returned from his trip to find that his front door had been vandalized, he knew the lengths Ellen was willing to go. Then, the unthinkable happened. One night, as Mark and Ava slept soundly, the house was set ablaze. The flames consumed their home with terrifying speed, and Mark barely managed to escape with his life. His heart pounded in his chest as he stood on the charred lawn, watching the structure that had been their sanctuary crumble to ash. He knew in that moment that this wasn't a random act of arson. It was deliberate. It was revenge. Through the smoke and haze, he saw Ellen standing across the street, recording the destruction with a satisfied smirk. His heart sank as the realization hit him. Ellen had orchestrated this. She had ruined their lives. But what was even more chilling was how she stood there, enjoying their pain. Mark turned to Ava, his wife, whose face was smeared with soot, but whose eyes held an eerie calm. "I don't think this was just about the light," Mark said, his voice hoarse. Ava didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at him, and then at the burning remnants of their home. Her face, so often serene, now held a quiet determination. She took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing as if preparing for something much larger than they'd yet faced. "Ava," Mark asked, confused by her composure. Then, in a voice that carried the weight of years of hidden experience, Ava said the words Mark had never expected to hear. "I used to be a Navy SEAL." Mark stood frozen, trying to process what she had just revealed. For a moment, it was as if the world had stopped turning. Ava had never mentioned her past, and now, everything about her made sense in a way that shook him to the core. With that revelation, their next steps became clear. Ava's training, her precision, her ability to remain calm under pressure. This was no longer just a battle for their home. It was personal. It was a fight for survival. While the community closed its eyes to their plight, Mark and Ava began to dig deeper. They discovered a trail of anonymous threats, cryptic notes demanding they remove the light or face worse consequences. But the clues led them to something much darker, something far beyond petty HOA disputes. They found connections to Ellen's son, Ethan, a man with ties to a secretive group of powerful individuals, a network of influence that stretched far beyond Oak Hollow. With Ava's military training and Mark's resourcefulness, they pieced together the conspiracy. Ellen was just a pawn in a much larger game, a game that had become personal because of the dark forces manipulating her, and they weren't going to let it go unchallenged. The final confrontation took place in an abandoned warehouse district outside town, where Ethan awaited them. The moment he saw Ava, a cold recognition passed between them, and the fight began. It was a brutal struggle, with Ethan using every dirty trick he had learned. But Ava's training was unmatched. She overpowered him, securing the evidence that would expose the network pulling the strings behind Ellen and her actions. With Ethan in custody, the community's eyes were opened. Ellen's reign of terror ended, and with it, her influence over the neighborhood began to crumble. Her smugness evaporated, and she was forced to step down as HOA president. For Mark and Ava, the victory was bittersweet. They had uncovered a dark truth, but they had also paid a heavy price. As the family began to rebuild, they planted a rose bush in their new home's front yard. It wasn't just a symbol of new beginnings, it was a reminder of the fight they had fought and won. The battle for their home, for their dignity, had taught them that sometimes holding on to your humanity was the greatest victory of all. In the end, Oak Hollow was still a peaceful town, but it was a community that had learned to respect the strength of those who stood up for what was right. And Mark, Ava, and Khloe would continue to live their lives, knowing that no matter what came next, they had each other and the unwavering belief that freedom was worth any price.